Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Recaps and Reacts with me, Sarah, where I just talk about movies and shows that I've recently watched that I thoroughly enjoy. If this is your first time to this channel, thank you so much for stopping by. If you are returning, thank you so much for stopping by again. And today I will be talking about Enola Holmes 2. So Enola Holmes 3 just recently came out. I'm filming this. It's the day after, it's the 5th of July. Enola Holmes came out July 1st, I believe. So I have not watched that one yet. I've been watching 1 and 2, refreshing my memory because I didn't realize how long ago Enola Holmes has come out. My goodness. The second one came out in 2022, and I probably have not watched that since 2022. So I had to refresh. And then I was like, while I'm refreshing my memory, let me do like a little recap to help some of you else or some of you others out there if you don't want to watch the movie again. So anyway, Enola Holmes 2. It is starring Millie Bobby Brown, Henry Cavill, Louis Partridge, Susan, let's see, Susan Wokoma, Adele Akhtar, and Helena Bonham Carter. And also, and David Thewlis. I hope I didn't pronounce that incorrectly. So pretty much the same characters are returning from the first one. Mycroft, Sam Claflin is not in this movie. I'm not sure why they cut him out. Maybe just wasn't to have another story in it. I don't know. But Mycroft, Sam Claflin is not in this movie. Um, and the synopsis that is given according to Bing, the overview, it says Enola Holmes 2 follows the young detective as she takes on her first official case finding a missing girl, only to uncover a conspiracy that draws her into London's gritty underbelly in high society. Blending mystery, humor, and historical intrigue, it pairs her wits with Sherlock's in an energetic feminist adventure. So, yay. Um, and the director for this is Harry Bradbeer. And once again, this is based on the Enola Holmes mystery series. Um, there are a bunch of books that are based on Enola Holmes. So let me get into my notes. Also, this movie is based on a true story. I'm going to go back more into the detail towards the end of the video, but this movie is based on an actual true story, based on the scenario. But like I said, I'll introduce that or talk about that more at the end of this video. So let's get started. Okay. So the movie opens with Enola running from cops. Then she turns to the camera and introduces. Look, then she turns to the camera and introduces. Then she turns to the camera and introduces herself, like kind of like she did in the first movie. She introduced herself and gave a little background of her. So the second movie, she is reintroducing herself to us, the audience, and we find out that she has started her business after the Tewksbury case that she saw from the last movie. Also, I didn't mention, I did just recap Enola Holmes, the first one, so please check out that video too. But I forgot, I've recently just recapped Enola Holmes 1, and it is on my channel right now if you want to watch that. And so, yeah, just forgot to mention that. But anyway, like I said, we find out she started a business after the Tewksbury case. She started her own detective agency. However, she's having a difficult time getting clients because she's young, of course, because she's female. And then, of course, she is Sherlock Holmes' sister. So you see kind of a little montage of clients or potential clients meeting with her. They're kind of asking, is Sherlock going to be involved with the case? And the Tewksbury case that has been solved, they thought Sherlock solved it, but in fact it was Enola. So she's having difficulties getting clients because her age, because they think she has a lack of experience, her being a female, and then her being Sherlock Holmes' sister, because anytime she could potentially take on a case, the clients are asking her, well, is he going to be involved? And then it kind of shows us what's been going on with Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock has many cases under his belt. His current case is having a difficult time solving it. It has stumped him. And then we find out her mother is still on the run, per usual, trying not to draw attention to herself. And like I mentioned before, Mycroft is not mentioned at all, like what's going on with him. Sam Claflin was not in this movie. I don't know what the choice was to cut him out, but he was not in this movie. And also, it kind of seemed like Mycroft did not too much care to be in the Holmes family anyway. So he kind of definitely seemed like the black sheep in his family. He may have gotten along with Sherlock, but yeah. So I guess there wasn't really a need for him in this movie. So we cut to Enola at night. Looks like she is sleeping in her office, and she's opening an invitation from Tewksbury to an annual ball. It has an invitation to the ball, and on the back of it, it says Enola, please come, signed Tewksbury. Then we cut to what's been going on with Tewksbury. We cut to Tewksbury showing him in a meeting with the Lords, saying a speech. He has been dubbed the champion of change and progress, a man to approach with the noblest of cause. Then it shows a flashback of Tewksbury when they last saw each other and when he kissed her hand on the last movie. The last time they saw each other, she had just saved him. He finally was inducted into the Lords, and that was his first meeting. They talked for a little bit, and then he kissed her hand through the gate, kissed her hand, and they went their separate ways. Um, but anyway, cutting back to present day, she says she hasn't seen Tewksbury because she does not have time for distractions, and he's still a nincompoop. Then we see that Enola has to sell her agency. I'm assuming she probably couldn't get the clientele, like what I mentioned before. And so she was going to go back home. But while she's packing her things, this little girl comes into her office. And she has a little piece of paper about Enola having her services. The little girl tells her that her sister has been missing. People think that her sister ran away, but she knows she hasn't. And then the little girl takes Enola to her home. We find out that the little girl's name is Bessie, and her sister's name is Sarah, and they are found sisters. So they're not actually blood related, but Sarah took Bessie in. Bessie says that Sarah has red hair, and then that's important because it's going to be like little clues throughout the movie about red hair. So we also are introduced to a character named May, and her and Enola have a frosty encounter. Not really sure why, but I'll go into that a little bit later. But you're not really sure why they have a frosty encounter first. So Nola's doing her detective thing around Sarah and Bessie's room, and Nola's just trying to get some details, figure out some things about Sarah, buy her belongings and things like that. And Nola sees some flowers on Sarah's desk. One pot of flowers are living, and the other pot is dying. This will be important for later, but just remember that. Enola sees a scrap of paper that says 12th of March. Enola asks Bessie if that date is important to them. May immediately says, that's enough. And she says, we don't need help from people like you. So when May says that we don't need help from people like you, it is kind of explained later that May thinks that Enola is a posh girl. So I guess like a little uppity society girl, and she doesn't want help from people like them, which will make sense when I actually find out as to why she's like that or why she's acting that way. You can kind of figure it out on the things that I'm going to say later on in this video as to why May was kind of frosty with her and throughout the movie. Bessie tells May that Enola's not going anywhere because she found her, and then May gets upset and she storms off. Bessie tells Enola Sarah didn't leave a note when she left, just the money that she got from her jobs. And so Sarah works two jobs. One job, she washes dishes at this pub called the Stag Antlers. And then Bessie gives the money, which were only two coins to Enola. So I guess the 2 coins from Enola were the money that Sarah earned from working at the pub, the Stag Antlers. So Bessie gives Enola that money for her services. And Enola says, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out later, which I thought was a sweet gesture because I'm pretty sure Nola's not going to ask her for the money because obviously she can see that they don't have a lot of money and where they're living, So I thought that was sweet. So we find out that Bessie and Sarah work at the match factory. May also works at the match factory as well. Bessie says that's where her and all these other ladies, I think that live in this particular place where Bessie lives, they all work at the match factory. They're all match girls, including May, like I mentioned earlier. Bessie tells Enola that the foreman accused Sarah of stealing something, but Bessie knows that Sarah doesn't steal. Enola says that's where she'll start, which means that Enola is going to take the case, and Bessie's very excited, so excited that she gives her a really big hug. So this is Enola's next case. After the Tewksbury case, this is Enola's official case as a detective. The case is to find Sarah Chapman. Next scene, you see Bessie and Enola going to the match factory. There are about 500 to 600 girls that all work at this factory, and it's called Lion Match Factory. As the girls enter the match factory, there is a man who has to inspect them as they come in. So all the girls, as they enter, they have to open their mouths, and he looks in. And we find out that he is looking for typhus. So please remember that. And there was one girl that came in, and she had kind of a deformed mouth, which that will be important for later when I actually, talk about what the story is really based on. So you do see one girl, her like the jaw, like she comes in, the guy tells her to open her mouth, and he tells her to go home because she has a very swollen jaw. They walk by something smoking, and Enola asks Bessie, "What is that?" And Bessie tells her that it's the phosphorus, and you'll get used to the smell. The smell. So that's very important. The phosphorus. That's very important because we're going to touch on that a little bit later. Enola's trying to find a way to get into the foreman's office or just the office of the match factory in general because, again, Sarah possibly stole something. So Enola wants to get to the office. She has a flashback of her mother saying, "All it takes is one small thing to change the rules of the world," and Enola gets into the office. Enola somehow knows that Sarah was in that office. Like she has this vision of Sarah probably going up the steps to get to the office. She opens a safe, and there is a book. It seems to be a ledger of names, and she opens it up. There are some pages ripped out with a strand of red hair. So remember, I told you that Sarah has red hair. Um, so it seems that Sarah may have ripped these pages out of the ledger. Enola overhears a meeting with Mr. Lyons and some other people. Mr. Lyon is very upset. Mr. Lyon has an arrangement. You kind of hear him yelling and saying that they had an arrangement, and there's these other people that he's meeting up with, and he's not thinking that the people are meeting up to their end of the arrangement. There is a man and a woman talking after the meeting. The woman tells the man perhaps the theft is connected. The man is very dismissive of her, and the man cuts her off and says that did he ask for her advice or did I tell you to get it done? She said she'll make sure the right people get it done, sir. And she starts looking around and she sees Enola. Then the male yells her name, which is Miss Troy, and then she hurriedly leaves with him. So I mentioned this moment just to show again, that's going to be important for later, but kind of still how men are towards women because we are in the 1800s. I think we're in the 1880s at this point. So yeah, just how men probably treat women. So that's why I mentioned that scene. So then the people in the meeting are walking around the match factory. They're being shown what the girls do at the match factory, and Enola makes it back by the skin of her teeth. Mr. Lyon talks to a match girl, Doris, and asks if her sister is still unwell. And she says she is. And Mr. Lion says that typhus is the fate of our time. Someone says for 2 years, this has been killing our girls, and it breaks my heart. And this will be important for later. So, for the past 2 years, typhus has been taking out these girls one by one. The girls are done for the day with their work day, and Enola asks Bessie how Sarah got into the office. Bessie tells Enola that Sarah got into the office because the foreman got distracted because there was a fire at May Station. And then Enola, wheels are turning. She's like, "Did May start the fire?" And Bessie says, "Oh," so excitedly. She tells Enola that she is a good detective. And so then we think that maybe May is not so bad after all. So later that night, Enola starts investigating May. She follows her, unbeknownst to May, that she follows her to this place called the Paragon, which happens to be some type of club. May does some kind of musical performance, like a little song, and she's singing with some other girls there. Enola starts to go backstage and investigates. She sees some type of lipstick at a desk that looks very similar to a lipstick that Sarah had at her desk at home with Bessie. So then we kind of figure out that Sarah also worked at this place as well. Then all of a sudden, May grabs Enola and puts a knife to her throat. And May says, "You have 5 seconds to tell me why you're here." And Enola asks if Sarah worked there. And May doesn't answer, but Enola figures that she did. Bessie doesn't know that she works at the Paragon because remember, Bessie had mentioned or said earlier that Sarah works at the Stag Antlers, but it's actually, in fact, called the Paragon. And Enola tells May that she helped Sarah get into the office. And Enola asks May why Sarah took those pages. And May asks or tells Enola just to leave it alone. So May had to get ready. This guy comes, the guy who runs the backstage or runs the shows or whatever, tells her that she needs to go get ready, May, for her next number. So Enola starts asking this guy questions. He says that Sarah has always been attracted to rich men. He said that there was a big man from society that would always come when she performed, and he would send flowers. He was very keen on Sarah. While the man is saying all this, Enola is going through Sarah's things, and then she finds a letter. Enola ends up leaving with a letter, and when she opens the letter, she finds that it's a love poem. And then also when Enola's walking away from this pub, it's at nighttime. So she's walking away from this pub, and there is a man that is following with her. He's kind of tall, has another freaking bowler hat. You know, the guy, this is not the same guy, but obviously, I guess that was, that was a fashion trend back then. So, it's a tall guy with a bowler hat that has a cane, and she senses him, like he's following her. She starts walking at a little bit of a faster pace and walks by another pub, and a man is thrown out in front of her. And then we see that it is Sherlock, and he is drunkety drunk, drunk, drunk. They're both shocked to see one another, and Enola helps him get home. Sherlock's house is a mess, and he tells Enola to leave everything alone because he's in the middle of a case. So they both wake up the next morning, and Sherlock already knows that Enola was messing with his stuff. And she also can tell that his current case is stumping him. He tells her to leave, and she offers to help him on his case. He refuses. She says sarcastically that the world would be a safer place if we didn't see the inside of Sherlock Holmes, only the outside. And she suggests, that he gets a roommate, and he just stares at her, and then he starts analyzing her in return. He asks her why she's working at a match factory, and he can tell by her fingernails because they're black around the fingernail. And he also can tell that she was choked by someone, which was May, remember from last night. He said either she was choked by someone or someone put a knife up against your throat. And he asked if she was in trouble because she is still his ward. He offers to help her, and then she refuses, and then she leaves. Next scene, we see Enola in the park, venting to the camera about Sherlock. So remember how I mentioned before, in the first movie, they did a lot of breaking up the fourth wall. She will often turn to the camera, speak directly into the camera, which is us, the audience. So I thought that was cool. So she's doing that right now. She's kind of venting about Sherlock. And then she runs into Tewksbury, and he asked how she was doing and if she's been well. And I'm assuming, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think they have seen each other since their last interaction where I said, he kissed her hand. I don't think they've seen each other since then. I mean, she tells him that she's working a case, and Tewksbury tells her it's strange because he thought he's seen her at the park before, because this is his route to the House of the Lords. And they have some small talk. Enola tells him that he has seen what he's done around town, through the papers. And then it cuts to an article of him being an eligible bachelor in the paper. Um, and he tells her, don't believe everything you read. And I said, ooh, okay, Shakespeare. So he's kind of telling Enola, don't think I'm not eligible, because he's not. He's only eligible for Enola. He then asks her why she hasn't replied to the letter he wrote her. And she says she's busy starting her business. He offers her his help, and she refuses. Then he leaves, and he stares at her for a little bit, and then he just keeps walking. So this is another important theme. I'm going to mention it later. As you can tell, the Holmes have difficulty asking for help and accepting help. So you had earlier how Enola, is asked, or if Sherlock is offering help to her, she is saying no. And then in turn, Enola is asking Sherlock, does he need help for something? And he says no, like he refuses her help. And then you have Tewksbury over here offering help to Enola, and she's like, no. And Tewksbury obviously is a powerful person. He's in society. He's a lord. Like, the man can do some things, but she's like, nah. So you can tell the Holmes have a little difficulty accepting help from others, and we will touch on that later on in this video. After Tewksbury leaves, she has an epiphany. She gets the love poem that she saw, or that she got from Sarah's belongings at the pub, and she deciphers an address from the poem, and it is 28 Bell Place, Whitechapel. So she arrives at that location, and she sees two jars of flies. One of the jars, the flies are dead, and the other jar, the flies are alive. Again, that'll be important for later. Um, and also remember, I had mentioned earlier that at Bessie and Sarah's place, there was a pot of plants or flowers that one was dead, and another plant of flowers, one was alive. So now we're coming into May's place, where we have a jar of flies where one is dead, or they're all dead, and then we have another jar of flies where they're alive. Connection. So Enola can tell Sarah was there because she saw a brush with a strand of her red hair. Then she sees May gurgling blood. She was stabbed in the stomach, and Enola's trying to help her, like she's pressing on her stomach, trying to stop the blood, but she passes away. However, before May had died, she did look down to Enola, and Enola grabbed some sheet of paper out of May's pocket. So that, I guess that's what May was gesturing to, was this was her pocket. So there was a sheet of paper, and it was a sheet of music notes. And she hurriedly puts it up her sleeve because she hears someone entering the room, and it's Inspector Lestrade. Now, Inspector Lestrade was in the last movie. I mispronounced his name in the first video that I did on Enola Holmes, the first one. Estrade. I kept saying Estrade. I don't watch stuff with subtitles, y'all. I probably should. But anywho, his name is Lestrade, and so he's back. He comes in, and he sees that Enola has blood all over her hands, and he asks her how it happened. She tells him the whole story of her investigation. And in the middle of her story, she hears like this tapping of the cane, and it sounds like the cane of that tall man that was following her the night before. Or it was the night before. And he opens the door, and Lestrade greets him as Superintendent Grail. So Lestrade explains the situation to him and that he's questioning Enola Holmes. And then Lestrade tells him she is Sherlock Holmes' sister, and she's a detective too. And Grail is not pleased by this. And in fact, he says, "Oh gosh, another one." So perhaps there is bad blood between Sherlock Holmes and him. So Grail is also looking for Sarah Chapman, and he also suspects Enola may have killed May. I mean, it doesn't look good. Clearly, they all walk in. May is dead. Enola has blood all over her hands, so it does look suspicious. So I will give them that. But we know Enola as an audience. We know she wouldn't do something like that. So he tells Lestrade to pat her down, and then Grail tells her to give her her purse. And he starts going through her things, then sees a sheet of paper up her sleeve, sticking out of her sleeve, and he asks her to give it to her. And Enola won't, making the situation look more suspicious to him. And then she runs away. And this is the scene that opened at the beginning of the movie where she's running from these cops. So that's how we got there. So Lestrade goes to Sherlock Holmes' place to look for Enola, and he is starstruck because again, it is Sherlock Holmes. He is that guy. So he's starstruck looking at his place, like looking at all the things around his place. And Sherlock asks him what Enola has done. And Lestrade says he can't tell him, but he does tell her that she needs to be questioned. And then he leaves Sherlock's home. He leaves Sherlock's home. In the meantime, Enola is trying to still escape the cops, and she managed to escape in a little hideout in Sherlock's home. And so Sherlock has this whole cork board, or this board, and it has his investigation on there. But behind that is like a little hideout. So I think you can come down the chimney or something, and you can hide there. And Enola was hiding there the whole entire time when Lestrade was there. And so once Lestrade leaves, Sherlock lifts up the board and Enola comes tumbling out. So Enola heard the conversation that Lestrade was having. Enola and Sherlock discuss his case that he's stuck on. He says that it's money and it's an account transfer going in and out of all these government offices that he thinks it may be extortion or blackmail. So then Enola ends up telling Sherlock about her case and explains how she is where she is now, like why she's on the run from these cops and all of that. He asked her why she ran, and she said that she has more evidence. And she mentioned that it was a man with a walk, and Sherlock immediately knew that it was Grail. So he says they have a history. She gives Sherlock the sheet of music, and Sherlock starts to play his fiddle, and he says it's horrible. Sherlock tells Enola to leave the music sheet with him, and she says, no, it's important. And honestly, to me, it was kind of like a little sister moment between the two because he's like, leave it with me and I'll figure it out. She's like, no, it's important. I want to figure it out. I want to do it. Because remember, I keep saying that, that's why she was having a hard time getting clients because she's kind of stuck in his shadow. She tells Sherlock that Grail said Sarah stole something and is blackmailing them. And Nola says she wouldn't do that. And Sherlock is like, how do you know that she wouldn't do that? Because you never met her. And Enola says she feels like she knows her. And Sherlock's like, don't get involved, don't get emotional. And he tells her to stay put. And Enola says no, because Sarah is her responsibility. Then Sherlock says one of the biggest mistakes a detective can make is to make the case about them. And he leaves, but tells Enola to please do not end up like him. So Sherlock goes to 28 Bell Place, Whitechapel. And Enola back at Sherlock's, she's going through her evidence. She's going through the paper and sees a story about the matchmaker's ball hosted by the Lion family. Remember the Lion family, Lion Match Factory. So this matchmaker's ball is going to be hosted by the Lion family. And remember that they own the factory with that Sarah, Bessie, and May work. And that's where Enola's doing her investigation. So the ball will be on the 12th of March. And Enola looks at the scrap of paper where she picked up that scrap of paper where it had 12th of March. And she was asking Bessie about that date. And she said that's not important to them. But it wasn't a date. It was, in fact, an address to where the ball is going to be. And also part of the Lyons family is the son, William. And Enola has a flashback when she was in the office and she overheard that meeting in the match factory, and she remembers someone being called William. So the son was also present at that meeting as well. She realizes she has to go to the ball, and we see a speech given by a man at one of the meetings. His name is Lord McIntyre, and he is giving the speech at the ball because we cut to the ball. Enola's at the ball, and he's praising Mr. Lyons and his son William. William was looking at a lady, and he was smiling at her. Very subtle, like you couldn't really tell, but obviously Enola's investigating, so she's looking. She can see this interaction between the two. And the lady had a feather and did like a gesture with it or something. And this was discreet, but like I said, Enola noticed it. So Enola starts walking around the ball and tries to have polite conversations that she learned from a book with the people in the meeting and at the match factory, and it is extremely awkward. Again, showing how sheltered Enola is. So remember, I've mentioned, and I mentioned the last movie, Enola is very sheltered. This is her first time kind of out and about in the real world because, she stayed at home with her mom. Most of the time, her mother was teaching her all these things to prepare herself for the real world. But in society, Enola doesn't know, like, what are the right things or what are the wrong things. Like, she has street smarts, but not society smarts, if that makes sense. But I think the movie does a real good job of showing it. But yeah. So anyway, Enola is trying to speak to William, I think, to like dance with him or something, but she approaches him without a chaperone, and that is a no back then. And William and the family is very dismissive of her, and Enola's in shock because obviously she's never dealt with that and she didn't know that she needs a chaperone. So she's kind of shocked about it. Meanwhile, we cut to Sherlock still trying to figure out his case. I'm not going to go into much detail about his case because that's a whole thing too. But yeah, so I'm just mentioning because it's going to be a little important for later. But yeah, he's still trying to figure out his case while Enola's at this ball. So Enola's like upstairs, like at the ball, watching the dance floor downstairs, and we see the lady, Miss Troy. We see the lady, that was the lady at the meeting that I mentioned earlier in this video. She approaches her and they start speaking. She introduces herself as Mira Troy, and she's the personal secretary to Lord McIntyre. She keeps telling Enola that she feels like they know each other, and that'll be important for later. But Enola tells her that they don't, and Enola introduces herself as Tabitha Timothy. Mira tells Enola that she mustn't let the ball concern her. It's just a performance and everyone is playing a part. Testing each other, she says it's fun once you know the rules. They observe the ladies waving their fans, and Enola asks Mira what they're doing, the women at the ball. And Mira says that they're saying something that is forbidden to the gentleman. Enola thanks her for that lesson. And then Mira says, "You're welcome." And she tells Enola, without power, women must rely on their wit for their fortune because time is short, and then gives her fan to Enola. Then she sees Tewksbury smelling some plants at the ball. So remember, Tewksbury loves plants, flowers. He had like a bit of a green thumb in the last movie, and I think it's just so cute. And so yeah, so he's around the ball and he's just like sniffing plants that he sees and trying to look at the flowers, admiring all of those. And she sees him and is like, "You need to teach me how to dance." And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And she says she's trying to save a girl's life. So he teaches her how to dance in the ladies' room. So they are in this massive ladies' room. It's huge. And while they're dancing, he asks her why she's watching him walk to the house of the Lords in the park. And she says he can't be trusted to take care of himself. And he says that he's a man now. And she says, I'm a man when I say you're a man. And he tells her dancing is all about trust, it's a union. And which is why he has always loved dancing. And I will have to say, for this to be Enola's first time dancing, it's going off flawlessly. And so I feel like him saying that is kind of a metaphor for these two, that they both trust each other and it's a union of each other. And, they have a chemistry, they like one another. So I feel like the dancing is kind of a metaphor for these two. Enola is really enjoying the dance, and it's just adorable to me because I just think they're so cute. And I think little Tewksbury is just the cutest thing. I think Louis Partridge, I think he's just so cute. Just want to pinch his little cheeks. But anyway, someone starts banging on the door and they have to end their lesson. And Tewksbury jumps, like he goes out the window. Obviously, he can't be in the bathroom with Enola because that, I mean, definitely would be frowned upon. Because I think at that time, too, like you always had to have when a man and a woman were in a room together, a man, or excuse me, the lady always had to have chaperone. So, or chaperone. So, can you imagine back in that time if they would have saw Tewksbury and Nolan in the bathroom? That would have been a scandal for the ages. So, anyway, um, Enola hurries out of the restroom and runs into the lady who was talking to with William Lyon. Enola goes to William and puts her name on his dance card. She will be his last dance. And he also puts his name on her dance card. And they go their separate ways until they dance. So William wrote his name on her dance card. So Enola gets the love poem that she got from Sarah's Belongings and gets the dance card and compares the handwritings. And we find out that William wrote this poem because his W was the same as a W in that poem. So it looks like William had wrote that poem. So Noble's eating some treats at the ball and sees Tewksbury speaking to all these women. These females are smitten with him. You can tell they just think he's cute and they just keep flirting with him. And the ladies who are talking to William in the room earlier, the lady who sees, okay, so the lady who was talking to William earlier in the room earlier sees Enola looking at her and starts a conversation with her. Also, shout out because this is Francesca from Bridgerton. So, where are my Bridgerton fans at, or my Bridgerton watchers? This is actually Francesca from Bridgerton. And you know what? It's so funny because when I watched Bridgerton, I kept trying to figure out Francesca looked so familiar to me when I first saw her, like in the third season, I think. I was like, this girl, I've seen her from somewhere else. And I think it was Enola Holmes this whole entire time. I just couldn't place it. She can tell that Enola is jealous of all of the ladies talking to Tewksbury. Enola says her and Tewksbury are old friends. And the lady bids her goodnight and introduces herself as Cicely. Then Cicely goes and asks Tewksbury for a dance. This scene is intercut with, or excuse me, the next scene intercuts with Cicely and Tewksbury dancing, William and Enola dancing, and then Sherlock trying to figure out his case. So Enola starts questioning William as they're dancing. She tells him she's doing an investigation trying to find Sarah Chapman, and his eyes widen slightly. He said he's shocked and says, Bessie hired you. So clearly he knows Sarah since he knows her sister. He tells her to stop asking questions because they're watching, and he gestures or motions to his father and Lord McIntyre. He says, if you have more questions, meet me at the library at midnight, and they agree to meet at midnight. Meanwhile, Sherlock starts to figure out his case. Again, not going to go into too much detail about that, but the deciphered message says that he deciphers a message and it says, "Good to meet you, Sherlock Holmes," and it's signed Moriarty. So, backstory with Moriarty. Moriarty is Sherlock's arch nemesis and is a mathematical genius. So that explains why this case was a financial crime. But I think this was just a way, like this case is a way to introduce the Moriarty character into the series. So at midnight or close to midnight, Enola is waiting for William in the library. However, Tewksbury comes in and Enola is annoyed and wants him to leave because he may scare him away. And Tewksbury is annoyed and he's like, all of this for a man? And Enola is like, leave. And then William enters the room. But then the cops and Lestrade show up right after. They arrest Enola and Tewksbury tries to help, but Enola reassures him and that she's okay. And she gives him the love poem discreetly and gives it to him. And then she's arrested. So the next scene, we see Enola in a cell being questioned by Grail. He asks her, he knows she was dancing with William Lyons at the ball, and why was she dancing with him? Did she want to kiss him, or is he answering questions about Sarah Chapman? And Enola stays quiet. Grail says there's someone who wants to speak to her, Sarah Chapman. Enola asks who, and Grail is quiet. And then she says, why were you following me that night? And she puts two and two together that he was actually following May. Because remember, she was following May that night as well. She looks at his shirt and says that it's silk. And then she mentions that that's a nice shirt for someone who works as a policeman. She then asks him who's paying him to kill the match girls. And then all of a sudden, Grail grabs this lady by her throat and puts her up against the wall and asks her where Sarah Chapman is. Obviously, Enola shook at this moment and she says she doesn't know. Grail says he'll find his information out somewhere else and tells her some detective she is and should have stuck to needlework and implies that she is going to get the death penalty in prison and leaves. And then Enola is crying. Next scene, Sherlock is getting a message from Lestrade, and you don't see the message, but obviously it's about Enola being arrested because we see him walking into the jailhouse. He tries to enter, but Grail ends up stopping him, and Sherlock asks to release Enola. Grail says no, she's in for murder. Sherlock says he went to the murder site and basically implied that Grail and his buddies are the one who killed May, and his sister shortly arrived after that. He says this because he also mentions that Grail arrived very quickly after Enola arrived, which is suspicious in itself. Grail says Enola cannot be released because her fingerprints were found at the scene. Sherlock is shocked because this is new, coming from Switzerland, as Grail mentioned. So him being able to find out the fingerprints, I guess that was something, it was a new thing that was happening that wasn't really practiced yet. So yeah. Sherlock says Enola had never touched that weapon. And Grail says, well, why were her fingerprints on it? And Sherlock just smiles, obviously, because he is defeated and leaves because he can't prove otherwise. And once he's outside of the jail, he's upset and he kicks the sign like right in front of the jail, and then he leaves and keeps stomping. Sherlock goes to Edith's place. Now remember, Edith is Miss Grayson from last movie. She is the one who taught Enola jiu-jitsu. And I'm probably going to assume that Eudora, the mother, Helena Bonham Carter, took all of her children to Edith to learn jiu-jitsu because we're going to find out Sherlock can fight too. Sherlock tells the situation to Edith and he asks for help. So the next scene, Enola is taken to prison, and you see her at this prison site. And then the next thing you know, um, Edith and her mother are busting Enola out of the jail. They literally bust the one of the walls out with probably an explosive of dynamite or something, and there's a hole in the prison wall, and Enola and all the other prisoners escape. So there's a carriage. Edith is driving or steering the carriage, and Enola and Eudoria are in the wagon part. And so Eudoria is asking Enola how's her case going. Enola says she's trying to find a little girl, but thinks she's made things worse. And Eudoria says, "Pish posh, you were onto something. Why else would they try to silence you?" And then Mother asks about the match factory. She says it's doing well, it's doubled its profits in 2 years, and the girls who work there are coming down with typhus. And Eudora makes a face and says, "That's a loose thread." Then Eudora says, "These match factory girls are expendable and replaceable. But this girl, Sarah Chapman, they care so much about, what does she know?" Enola says she stole some papers. Eudora asks what she was going to do with them, like what was her plan with these papers. She knows something. She's not a thief, she's not a blackmailer, but she sounds like a troublemaker in a good way. She knows something, and that is infinitely more dangerous. And FYI, while Enola and her mother are having this conversation, they're they're running away from the cops because obviously, again, Enola just busted out of prison, so they're running away from the cops. And while they're having this conversation, like Euphoria is throwing out like non-violent explosives, I guess, kind of trying to just slow them down, the cops down, or hopefully to get them off their trail. So she's just throwing out these non-violent explosives, non-harmful explosives out the side of the carriage while they're having this conversation. However, Grail is right behind him, and now he's chasing him because the cops end up getting off the trail. Grail is shooting a gun at them as well. Grail ends up alongside of Edith and is about to shoot her, but Edith is that girl, and she has this rope, and she gets the rope and like wraps it, like kind of lassos it around that revolver and yanks it out of his hand, which I thought was fire. While she's steering the carriage, mind you. And so then Grail sees a stake on the ground, gets the stake, and like throws it into the wheel of the carriage, and then the wheel breaks, and then they end up veering off the road. So the ladies are ejected from the carriage, and now it's Grail and his goons surrounding them. The cops are about to handcuff the ladies, but of course they start whooping some tail, the ladies. They defeat the men, and apparently the carriage is an explosive in itself. But Eudoria's like, "You're gonna need to run when I do this because this is actually harmful." And Eudoria detonates it, and they run, and the ladies get away, leaving Grail upset. As Eudoria, Edith, and Enola are walking around, because they're in the forest, they're walking around the forest, and Eudoria asks Enola about Tewksbury. And she says it seems like he's not so useless because he's doing good things. Because last movie she called him a useless boy, so it's kind of a little bit of a callback to the last movie. Enola says that he's not her boy, and Eudoria feels that she raised her and her brothers to be too independent. Because, like I mentioned earlier, they do not ask for help. When they are offered help, they do not accept it. So, she then tells Enola that she will do well by herself, but she will be magnificent with others. And she mentions how Edith helped her, pull off this heist, or this Enola breaking out of prison. And of course, Edith has helped her with other things. She tells Enola to find her allies and work with them, and she will become more of herself, and she'll make more noise than she could ever imagine. Then they say their goodbyes, and then they go their separate ways. So Enola goes back to London, and she goes to Bessie's house. She tells her she needs to get her things because she needs to find, or she needs to be in a safe place. Bessie says one of the factory girls, Doris, has an extra bed. So remember at the very beginning of this video, Doris was one of the match girls where Mr. Lyons was talking to, and they were walking around the factory about her sister being ill. She ended up passing away. So remember this whole typhus thing, right? So Enola notices around the room that the plants that I mentioned earlier, one plant is dead and the other one is alive. There's different match pieces in it. And Enola asks Bessie when the matches changed color. And Bessie says about 2 years ago. So then Enola has a flashback to the speech that Lord McIntyre was giving at the ballroom. And in the speech at the Lions Ball, he had said that the Lions Match Factory has gone from red to black, or should he say white? So the dead plant had the white piece in it, and then the red, the plant that was alive had a red piece of the matchstick in it. So Enola has also noticed in the last 2 years that these girls have been getting typhus. So Enola's starting to figure it out. So the next scene, Enola goes and asks Tewksbury for help. Enola tells him that Sarah has evidence that the phosphorus that the girls are using at the match factory is killing them. The factory is trying to cover it up as typhus, and someone is going to kill Sarah for it. They're interrupted by a knock on the door, and Enola hides because she's on the run from police and she's busted out of prison. Cicely is at the door. She's so remember Cicely from the ball, where Enola met her. She tells Tewksbury that she wants to talk to him and wants to tell him things, but he tells her that they can talk another time, and then Cicely leaves. Enola is suspicious that they're talking about a relationship, and Tewksbury tells her it's not about that. Cicely wants to change a match factory law because she has discovered some corruption. And then you can start seeing the wheels turning with Enola. So Tewksbury is talking in the background about his feelings because, Enola thought, or Enola was jealous that Cicely was there. Um, but Enola's like in her own world, thinking of all the clues that she's had and putting everything together in her mind about this investigation. So she's not really paying attention to Tewksbury and as he's talking, but she has an epiphany and realizes that Cicely is actually Sarah Chapman. And I just want to say this because how I mentioned Sarah Chapman's hair is red. So Cicely has been wearing a blonde wig. So anyway, um, so when Enola has the epiphany that Sarah is in fact, or Cicely is Sarah, she runs out of Tewksbury's home, and Tewksbury runs after her, and he's like, "Hey, did you hear anything that I said?" And Enola asked what that gesture he showed. So actually, let me go back. So when Tewksbury was showing or teaching Enola how to dance, he had a fan and he showed her a gesture. So Enola asked, "What did that gesture mean?" And he said, "It means I love you." And then she has another flashback of Sarah doing that same gesture that I mentioned earlier to William that I said was very discreet, but Enola noticed it. So Sarah did that same gesture to William Lyons, and she realized that Sarah and William are in fact in love, and they have been working together to stop the corruption at his father's match factory. Enola tells Tewksbury that they wanted Tewksbury's help. So William and Sarah, they wanted Tewksbury's help. That's why they invited him to the ball. Tewksbury tells Enola they must go back inside because there's much to talk about. And Enola stops it and tells him that they do have a lot to talk about because he loves her and she loves him. And I thought it was so cute. I just loved it. So they both just profess their love to one another. And Tewksbury is in shock and is like, "You love me." And she says, "You really are an nincompoop." and but they can't really talk about that now because obviously she just found out about this whole thing. So she tells Tewksbury to get a cab. Enola breaks into the match factory with Tewksbury, and Tewksbury is keeping guard of the outside. Someone touches her on the shoulder, and they get into a small fight, and it turns out that it's actually Sherlock. She asks him why he's here, if it's for his case or hers, and he says both. He says Grail got her fingerprints by oxidized phosphorus dust from the match factory. He lifted it from the table and applied it to the knife. So that's how Enola's fingertips got onto or excuse me, that's how Enola's fingerprints got onto the weapon that killed May. He also mentioned that his adversary, Moriarty, has led him to the match factory. They walk into the office of the match factory and find a slain William Lyons. Sherlock tells Enola not to get emotional, and then they start investigating and deduce that it was Grail. But Sherlock says, "Who asked?" Enola thinks it's McIntyre. Sherlock asks how she came to that conclusion. And she says that William stole from the Treasury Department and Lord McIntyre oversees the Treasury Department. She thinks he stole proof of his father and McIntyre conspiring about the factory. McIntyre has been profiting from the factory and they now use a cheaper phosphorus that's deadly. Tewksbury barges in and admonishes Enola for leaving him outside, but then gets starstruck because he sees Sherlock. And real quick, Enola's like, now is not the time. And then she gestures to poor William Lyons over there, who is deceased. And then obviously Tewksbury's freaked out about that. Sherlock then sees McIntyre did not kill him. Excuse me. Sherlock then says McIntyre did not kill William. He believes that his adversary, who has sent him out on a goose chase, has thrown them off of the whole thing, and to make it look like William was killed by McIntyre. Enola discovers a paper in William's hand, and it's a sheet of music. Enola has a piece of that sheet as well, and the title of the sheet music is called Truth of the Gods. And Sherlock thinks it's biblical or mythical, but Tewksbury says, or it could be theatrical. And they both look at Tewksbury, and he says, the gods, the top row of the theater is called the gods. And Enola says, it isn't music. And she has a flashback of the Paragon Theater. So remember, the Paragon Theater is where May and Sarah worked at, which I guess is like a pub slash theater because they did like little music numbers and stuff. So Enola has a flashback of the Paragon Theater that she visited or followed May to, um, and says it's a map. So the next scene, they're on their way to the Paragon Theater. Tewksbury asks what they're fixing to get into because he knows there's going to be some violence, and he asks Enola to teach him how to fight, and she does, and it's cute. And then they share their first kiss, which is very sweet, very, very, very cute and sweet. They arrive at the theater, and they are on the top row of the theater, where Tewksbury said that's where the gods are. Enola finds some papers underneath the chair, and then Sarah walks out at that moment and takes off her blonde wig. And remember, because Sarah is Sicily, and she says the papers that Enola found are an agreement between Lyons and McIntyre to change the phosphorus to the cheaper, deadlier phosphorus. And Sarah says that's all the proof that they need. And that's what William stole for Sarah. And there are pages of the register of all of the girls who passed away at the factory from the phosphorus. And that's what Sarah had stolen from the office, from that ledger that we had mentioned earlier. That's what she stole. And Sarah says she couldn't let them be forgotten. Enola says that this is proof that the factory girls are dying from the phosphorus. And then Sarah says Enola is a bloody good detective. And Enola returns the compliment. Tewksbury says that he will be sure to share this with the world. And then Sarah says they must tell William, and they tell they tell Sarah that William passed away. And she said he had been trying to keep her safe. And then Sherlock brings them all back to reality because they're getting emotional over it. But you know how Sherlock is like, we gotta stick to the facts. We're in this right now, so we gotta move quickly. So then Grail enters the chat with his goons, and he also enters with Bessie at knife point. Grail tells him to give the papers, and he'll let Bessie go. Enola walks to Grail to give him the papers, but Bessie bites his hand, and then a fight ensues. I'm not going to go into details about this fight, but it's a pretty epic scene. Sherlock's doing his thing, Enola's doing her thing, and Sarah and Bessie are like running around, and then Tewksbury's down there trying to do his thing, but he ends up doing a knockout blow. But anyway, they're all fighting themselves, and they end up defeating the bad guys, including Grail, and then McIntyre walks in with his entourage. So I guess this is Sherlock's client. So I guess McIntyre was probably the one to call on Sherlock about the case. That's financial case that Sherlock's been trying to figure out. Lord McIntyre, is his client. He gives Enola her kudos, but wants Sarah Chapman arrested for theft and blackmail. However, Sherlock stops him and says she's not the blackmailer. And it's in fact McIntyre's assistant, Mira Troy. Enola and Sherlock explain what happened. I'm not going to go into the details, but William found the contract. This was Mira's money train, as they call it, and they couldn't have that, so she hired Grail. Things got out of hand, and she tried to skew the evidence towards Lord McIntyre, but it was a misstep and calls her Moriarty. So if you arrange the letters of Mira Troy, it spells Moriarty. So Mira Troy, Lord McIntyre's assistant, has been Moriarty this whole entire time. Moriarty starts to explain herself, and then McIntyre gets upset and admonishes her for taking advantage. And she's like, I take advantage. I because she's been giving him all these ideas and things and she gets zero credit, and she says because she's a woman she can't advance herself, so she had to find a way around it, and it was fun, she says. And she's a little manic when she's saying all of these things, so it's a little creepy how she's talking. But anyway, she's arrested for extortion, and she says that she hopes to dance with the Holmes again, and she's taken off. So this also her talking about how it was fun and all this other stuff, playing a game, blah 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 blah. She kind of hints at that when she's talking to Enola at the ball earlier when they're at the Lions ball together. She said how everyone is playing a game and everyone is playing a role or playing a part, and so she kind of touches on that in her speech as to why she's done everything. She feels like society is a game, and once you figure it out, you can do whatever you want to do. So McIntyre gets the papers and he sets the papers on fire, and Tewksbury calls him corrupt and kind of goes after him, but Sherlock says, patience, patience, and McIntyre goes off. Sarah, Enola, Bessie go back to the factory. Sarah stands on her workstation and starts talking to the girls, tells the girls that it is time to stop working, and she tells them she knows that she's scared, but this is all the power that they have. And then they all start stomping together, and then they walk out of the factory together. The next scene shows Enola back at her agency, and Sherlock comes in and gives her the paper, like the newspaper, and tells her that it seems like her boy is learning how to fight. And it shows a headline that Lord McIntyre is arrested for corruption, and Tewksbury was the catalyst for that. And then she says, it's not my boy. He's not my boy, which we know that's her boy. Currently, Enola is working as a detective, and basically the clients pay what they can pay. And then Sherlock asks her to work with him. And she said that is the kindest offer, but she would just be in his shadow. But she does tell him that she likes this version of him. And I'm assuming the version where he's actually asking for help, he's opening up more. And she said a friend would do him well. And he tells her to visit from time to time. And then Tewksbury arrives and takes her out on a date. Then Sherlock reads the paper and finds out that Moriarty has escaped. And he kind of had like a little bit of smirk on his face because, Moriarty keeps him on his toes. So I guess that's going to be a new case for Sherlock here. Um, the movie ends with Tewksbury and Enola bantering on their date, and it's adorable. And so it kind of just blacks out, but it cuts to basically what the story was about. You know how earlier I mentioned how this movie was based on a true story? So this was based on the Match Girl strike, which was an 1888 labor strike in London. So according to Bing, it says the Match Girl strike of 1888 was a landmark industrial action by women and teenage girls working at a match factory in East London against long hours, low pay, hazardous conditions, and unfair wage deductions. So this, according to Wikipedia, says that the working conditions in the match factory had caused great discontent, up to 14-hour work days, poor pay, made far worse in 1808 by a poor harvest, which caused hours to be drastically reduced, unjust fines, having no clean area to eat, and the severe health complications of working with allotropes of white phosphorus, which cause phosphorus necrosis, also known as Phosphorus chronicus or phossy jaw, which phossy jaw causes is basically necrosis of the jaw. Which I had mentioned earlier in this movie that when Enola and Bessie were coming in to be to the match factory, and they were getting inspected by that guy by opening their mouth, and there was one lady who had a big jaw, and I'm assuming it was the phossy jaw that she had, so she couldn't work. So she had, it was from the phosphorus, that the white phosphorus that they were using. So yes, and Sarah Chapman actually is a real person, and she actually led the strike. So that was really cool. This movie was actually based on the true story of the Match Girls factory strike. So that was cool. This was based on the Match Girl strike of 1888, and it was based on a true story. So that was really cool, and it was led by women, women fighting for their rights, and of course we love that, and that's what I love about Enola Holmes is how they um, put these women in positions to fight for themselves, and how women and little girls can fight for themselves, and I love to see that. And so when that's mentioned on the end of the movie that this is like based on the Match Girl strike, they had a quote that said, "It only takes one flame to light a fire," and love that quote. I love that. So that was cool. And then there is a mid-credit scene with Sherlock. So there's a mid-credit scene where there is a gentleman coming to Sherlock's home, and Sherlock's like, "Hey," and he's like, "I hear you're looking for a roommate," and he's like, "No," and in fact, Enola sent him that way, and Sherlock invites him in, and he says, you know, "What's your name, Mister?" Oh, not Mister, Doctor Watson, John Watson. So, Doctor John Watson is Sherlock's loyal friend and sidekick. So he's introduced at the very in the mid credit scenes of this movie, which I do believe he's in the third movie. So that was the end of Enola Holmes 2, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Rewatching it again, it was so much fun. Really like that it was based on a true story. And yeah. So please tell me your thoughts of the movie, what you loved about it. Because please, guys, watch this movie. This movie is amazing. I love Enola Holmes. You know, it's a pleasant surprise for me because I didn't think it's not typically something I would watch, but Henry Cavill was in it and Sam Claflin were in the first one. So again, that's how I got into this. And so I really enjoy the story. So the third one is out now. So I will be watching that, and then I will be recapping that one very soon. And I cannot wait to watch the third one. I have not watched it at all yet, but I can't wait to watch it. But anyways, like I said, guys, let me know your thoughts and your comments about what you think about Enola Holmes 2. Please come back and watch my third recap when I post that. Thank you for stopping by for this video. I appreciate you all watching if you got this far, because I know it's a long one. But thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you all next time. Bye.